If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Before diving into this evening's address, I wanted to make a note about next week's postings. I'll be going on hiatus for the week, so there's not going to be any moments of truth. We will, of course, resume with next Sunday's evening address. In the meanwhile, I leave it to the family to continue giving the enemy pure hell. Now, that said, I've said it before, and I think it bears repeating. It's so ironic that the man whose name has become synonymous with lies has a lot of people speaking the truth, or rather not speaking the truth. Recently, as part of his ongoing Operation Mega Chaos, the Orange Man decided to let loose the dogs of Bohr, which in this case means the unreconstructed apartheid reject Elon Musk and his maniac minions have been set loose in DC, and the predictable chaos has ensued. Now keep in mind, these are the guys who love to brag that apparently they are the only people who earn their position in the world. These guys are the ones who do it based on merit. Meanwhile, we see the only thing that they've got is the old boy network that hands them jobs. The latest recipient of white privilege du jour is a guy named Marco Ilez, a DOGE employee, that's Elon Musk's fictional Department of Governmental Efficiency. He got fired because a number of his racist posts had come to light. Imagine that. Elon Musk, this apartheid reject, he surrounds himself with a whole bunch of bigots and racists. I mean, frankly, I'm shocked. Because Elon Musk is the last person on earth that I would ever associate with anything racist. I mean, the guy has been just the most colorblind, egalitarian, racially neutral person you can imagine. Well, except for the Nazi salute. And except for the fact that he seems to agree with everybody who posts on Twitter something that's anti-black or racist or even anti-Semitic. And the numerous lawsuits against his companies for racial discrimination. I mean, if you just leave those things out, isn't Elon Musk the poster boy for the most colorblind person in the world? But getting back to this Mark Ilez character in particular, this individual is one of Elon Musk's picks to be in his DOGE division, and these guys are supposed to be running around having direct access to the U.S. Treasury Department's payment system. And what do we know about this Ilez guy? Well, we know that he likes to post all kinds of hot takes on Twitter. The account in question previously had the username @Marco_Ilez, and the user described themselves as an employee of SpaceX and Starlink. Ilez allegedly changed the name of the Twitter account to @NULLPTR, a play off a keyword in C++ computer code language. Now, among his many hot takes, he wrote, "Just for the record, I was racist before it was cool. Normalize Indian hate." He posted that one back in September. Apparently, he didn't like hearing about the predominance of people from India in California's Silicon Valley. Interesting. You got all these people here who try to claim that they don't have anything against Asians at all. They want a colorblind, merit-based society, and yet here these guys are saying, ooh, these people are out competing against us. Well, we're going to lie when we go to court and say, oh, we're going to file a lawsuit on their behalf, and as soon as the lawsuit is successful, okay, now all you Asians get the hell out of here. And you can't say it's because of race, because you were in there with us. You vouched for us. You were part of that lawsuit too, so now we went ahead and we got you shut out too. The black media's been talking about that for years. These little racists out there in Silicon Valley, they don't like these Asians. They never did. It was always an ethno-political bank shot, this whole nonsense about, oh, we're going to say that Asians are being discriminated against and blacks are being given preferential treatment. The people saying that knew it was a lie, and the individuals who went along with it knew that it was a lie too. But for the coup de grace this Ilez character posted in June, I would not mind at all if Gaza and Israel were both wiped off the face of the earth. Now, this is the guy who Elon Musk wanted to have direct access to the U.S. Treasury Department's payment system. On a side note, I think it's totally natural that the richest man on earth, who is also one of, if not the biggest recipient of U.S. government and state subsidies, is now wanting to get his hooks directly into the U.S. Treasury. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? But this is the reason why I actually like the fact that the Orange Man is in the White House now. All of these little white supremacists who have had to try to pretend that they were basically human beings all this time, now they can show their pure savage face. They feel like, hey, we got the Orange Man in here. We know he's only here for 4 years. And if we're going to have a transformative effect, transformative meaning destructive, then we got to go ahead and back him 110%. What do we have to lose, as the Orange Man would say? So it's good that he's president because now Elon Musk is showing what the world he's always been. He's not pretending to be anything else, and he's brought all of his little racist buddies with him. And the people who thought they were on the team, well, they're finding out that basically they were never on the team to begin with. Here's a fun fact for you. J.D. Vance's wife is Indian. So when this Elez guy was saying he wanted to normalize Indian hate, hell, he might as well have said that straight to the vice president's wife's face. And yet, J.D. Vance, who claims that there's not a racist bone in his body, why, look at my Indian sock puppet, my Indian crash dummy, my Indian wife here. When he was asked about this, he said, well, maybe Elez should just be brought back. See, this is why I'm glad the orange man won the election. These white supremacists are being forced to go on the record. He wasn't about to sit there and say, well, I think that we should go ahead and have this guy thrown out. No, they're trying to normalize all of this hate speech. And if J.D. Vance's wife gets caught in the crossfire, so be it. He's throwing her under the bus. He ain't sticking up for his wife. Far as he's concerned, her dignity means nothing. It's his white privilege that matters. But this Elez guy, he hates Israel. And this story broke about the same time Benjamin Netanyahu came to town with Trump saying we're going to take over Gaza and turn it into the Riviera. Of course, neither Netanyahu nor anybody else in his entire government, quote-unquote, has said a word about this incident. Gee, I wonder why. They've been losing their minds for the last year if a college kid so much as has on a Palestinian flag lapel pin. But here you got a guy sitting right next to the richest man on earth, being vouched for by that guy, and he's sitting here saying, I don't care if Israel gets wiped out, and Netanyahu doesn't say boo about it. But this guy who said all this stuff about Israel, he'd like to see Israel wiped off the face of the earth. Now this Elez guy, he was forced to hand in his resignation, and you would have thought that was the end of it, but Elon Musk, he was not going to let this one go away. After all, this is one of his guys, and he's trying to show that apartheid South Africa is coming to the United States. This is the hard line he wants to take because that's what Elon Musk is after. He wants to go ahead and see if he can bring back the good old days. And that being the case, he went on his little platform of Twitter. He asked the people in a poll whether or not they would want him to rehire this Elez character, as if the fix wasn't in from the very beginning. How the hell is this guy supposed to have a poll on Twitter when he's the one who controls the website? So the result is probably going to be whatever he wants it to be. And what a surprise. The results of his so-called poll, all of Elon Musk's little neo-Nazis said, sure, go ahead and bring back this Elez character. You should go ahead and rehire him. Ain't that something? The guy hands in his resignation, and then you got the guy who's really running the country now, and he's saying, you know what, I don't care what he said, what he's done. You guys tell me whether or not you think he should be brought back. Yeah, as if Twitter is going to be the kind of place that says, let's go ahead and punish white supremacist talking points. So it's been a very busy week around the Orange Man's insane asylum. This guy who caused all of this problem, he resigns only for phony Stark to say, I'm going to go ahead and bring the guy back. And what about all of those people who had previously been pretending as if they were just so concerned about anti-Semitism before now? You know, the people who basically wanted to get college kids thrown out of college simply because they said you shouldn't exterminate the Palestinians. Or the people who wanted to try to turn black people into the face of anti-Semitism for the umpteenth time in a row. What about these people this week? Where the hell have they been at? Where the hell were all of these people who were doing this phony outrage about Kyrie Irving and Kanye West at from last year? I'd like to know, where's Ari Emanuel at? He can go ahead and treat us to another one of his BS-laden op-eds. And meanwhile, Jonathan Greenblatt and his pals over at the ADL have been MIA. In fact, if you want to see just how desperate the ADL is to stay away from this, this is the front page of their website. Doesn't mention anything about the fact that the man who is literally sitting next to the president has one of his flunkies and lackeys talking about how he doesn't care if Israel gets wiped off the face of the earth. However, if you scroll down on this website, you do see that the ADL is once again, just in the last couple of days, rehashing the Kanye West as an anti-Semite trope. This is what's on the front page of their website right now, today, as we speak. This is what's the most important thing that the ADL is focusing on right now. Not the guy who's the richest man on the planet sitting next to the president in the nuclear button as they fight to re-employ individuals who are saying wipe Israel off the map. They don't even mention it. On the ADL's website, they don't even mention it. As if it didn't even happen. They're not concerned about the guy who's the richest man on the planet giving Nazi salutes, who is going to the mat for individuals who say wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Instead, it's let's go ahead and rehash Kanye West. Yeah, because they're scared. Black people are soft targets because we have no power. Meanwhile, you got these white supremacists who are in there, rich white supremacists, powerful white supremacists, and you got the ADL quaking in their boots. It just goes to show what the ADL has devolved into. You know, decades ago, it was quite a while back, the ADL was actually a respectable organization, more or less. But now, since Abe Foxman and worst of all, Jonathan Greenblatt have been in charge, this is what the organization has become. They long ago stopped caring about anything having to do with advocacy or public safety for people of the Jewish faith. Instead, for about the last 30 years or so, the ADL has had Abe Foxman and Jonathan Greenblatt clout chasing for their own personal benefit. They try to get as many people behind their parade as possible so that they can walk in the room and say, see, I got people behind me. I got people behind me. But it's been all about them. They don't care about anyone else. Because when you sit on your hands as the richest man on the planet fights to re-employ a guy who said things far more inflammatory than any of the kind and charitable things that college kids were saying last year, when you decide that you're going to prioritize terrorizing college kids for exercising their First Amendment rights, meanwhile you got a blatant anti-Semite telling you he wants to wipe your little home country off the face of the earth, and you don't say boo, instead you're like, let's deflect on a Kanye West, let's find a safe target to go after. When that's what you're doing, you are a liar when you claim that you are concerned about the safety and well-being of Jews. You cannot tell me that anything that Kanye West says is more threatening or frightening to you than what the richest man on the planet's buddies are saying. This is what's going on right now. You got the man who is right next to the president, basically the co-president of the United States, which is what Elon Musk is. And these are the people that he's bringing into the administration to make policy. But then again, when Elon Musk was giving Nazi salutes at Trump's inauguration festivities, these exact same groups were mum. They didn't have nothing to say about it. Well, he made a gesture. Yeah, you real scared now. What they're showing you is basically they know that they got a guy in the White House now who's not afraid to pull their card. And Trump, he already said some stuff in the past that made them raise an eyebrow. But now you got Elon Musk in there giving his history. He's the richest man on the planet. What are you going to do? You're going to put the arm on him? He's already gotten his hook so deep inside of the military-industrial complex with Starlink, and he's also got his hooks in deep with all of that Green New Deal stuff. He's shored up his position very firmly. So the usual tricks that they might try to use to put the pressure on, put the arm on him, that ain't going to work, especially considering how much money he gave to Trump's campaign. Clearly, somebody must have taken away Jonathan Greenblatt's phone because he hasn't been bringing that same energy to Twitter like he did before. He's been in hiding. Nobody's saying anything about the fact that the man standing next to the most powerful guy on the planet is surrounded by card-carrying bigots who are saying all this stuff about Israel could be wiped off the face of the earth for all they care. And when this guy is forced to resign, Elon Musk himself says, nah, we're bringing him back. I guess Greenblatt's been quiet for the same reason that he and other professional outrage actors said nothing when Musk agreed with a tweet that accused Jews of hating white people. They didn't have anything to say about that either. Yeah, as far as they're concerned, we're going to go ahead and take shots at black people because they're safe targets. They don't have the ability to push back. But as for these white supremacists, you know, the ones who actually did carry out the Holocaust and every single episode of anti-Semitic persecution that there's ever been hasn't been carried out by black people. And yet black people are the main ones that the Jonathan Greenblatts and others decide that they're going to try and make into the whipping boy for the umpteenth time. After all that, after all the actual racism and hatred, not phony pretend bigotry like the nothing burger Kyrie Irving was accused of, or the garbage tier propaganda that Juju Chang ran against black people, we have actual anti-Asian hate and actual anti-Semitic remarks coming from the highest office in the land. And all those same people who are full of so much outrage who couldn't wait to wag their finger in black people's faces are in hiding today. That's what this evening's address is about. And this is the kind of thing that you and I should make sure to bear in mind, because this is the kind of thing that we can throw in their faces repeatedly next time they call themselves trying to point the dirty end of the stick at us. We're going to point out, well, gee, when Elon Musk had a bunch of folk in the White House saying Israel should be wiped off the face of the map, you guys were completely and thoroughly quiet. Where's Goldie Taylor at to tell people that white anti-Semitism isn't rare, it's ingrained? Where's she at? Where's she at to tell people that Elon Musk is malignant and dangerous? Why? Because there's millions of white males who idolize Elon Musk, see his success, richest man on the planet, and believes what he says. Why don't they push reporting that claims that white males are basically zombies under Elon's control? Because if a bipolar rapper and an NBA athlete are so influential with black males, then surely the richest man on the planet, who is now co-president of the United States, is infinitely more deserving of condemnation. And we have to beware of the impact he's going to have on white males, especially young white males, because just look what he's done to poor Mark Elias. First, Elon is giving Nazi salutes at Trump's inauguration, and now this. But the blame black people first crowd are making excuses for Elon's Nazi salute. Why, they won't even call it a Nazi salute. They call it a gesture instead. Yeah, they got on code for that one, didn't they? They're so on code right now because it's so blatant now. All the lies about, this isn't who we are as America. No, this is exactly what America is. See, you wouldn't be able to get this under a Kamala Harris presidency. She would be seeing all this garbage and giving us excuses, and she ain't going to do nothing. And Merrick Garland would not be doing anything either, and people wouldn't be seeing it and able to make excuses for it. Under a case like this, you can't make any excuses for this. They're a hell of a lot more reluctant, so this is a good thing happening. If you're going to have a freaking face peel, you can't exactly do that gently. The entire reason this scandal's broken wide open is not because Elon Musk himself is posting all this bigotry, even though he's done plenty of co-signing of racist remarks in the past, but because this young white male who worked for him did it, and that calls into question how much of an influence Elon Musk has had on him. See, nobody could accuse Kanye or Kyrie Irving of corrupting the morals of the youth, black, white, or otherwise. There was zero evidence that Kyrie Irving is anti-Semitic. And as for Kanye West, this guy is bipolar, and half the stuff that comes out of his mouth is unintelligible and the rest is unintelligent. Nuff said. Where is the evidence at that either of these two black men had caused so much as one young black male to be anti-Semitic or anything else for that matter? There was none. And yet the white media and its bootlick proxies were just pushing that boulder up the hill, trying to prove that they could conjure magic and make people believe things simply because they said it. So they just kept repeating that lie relentlessly until it eventually died a natural death. This is the purest evidence that all the phony outrage about Kanye and Kyrie was a pack of lies, crisis acting, and the people who did it know it. Because here you have an actual example of the very things that they falsely claimed about Kanye and Kyrie, only it's coming not from the NBA or from some rapper on a podcast, but it's coming from the White House, from people who make global policy. And yet all of those people who are clutching their pearls and, what about the black community? We need to have the black community admit to its bigotry. These people are quiet now. Yeah, and we're going to remember this and throw it in their faces from now till the end of time. They'll never be allowed to say anything about black people again without us throwing this cowardice on their part in their faces. Here you have actual hate speech, actual anti-Semitic speech. You have actual bigotry coming from the very top, from the White House no less. And one of the guys who's responsible for this stuff is the most powerful man on the planet, and the other one is Donald Trump. I wonder where Juju Chang is at now to talk about Stop Asian Hate. Because you got this stuff coming from the White House now. They're protecting individuals who are doing this mess. No pretend phony Asian hate. You got the real thing now, and Juju Chang's in hiding. And it's also important to note this because people like Ed Blum and Stephen Miller have been working nonstop to put these guys in positions of power. Keep in mind, Blum and Miller are both Jewish, and yet they've been ready to jump out a window to put anti-Semites in control of the government and to lie about black people full-time in order to do it. But they're not alone. As this DOGE tool said, Indians can be replaced by LLMs. That means large language models, in other words, AI, and that they're all going back. So when it comes to all of these mass deportations, it looks like some of the Trump insiders, if they had their way, there would be a hell of a lot more than just people being flown back to Colombia on the U.S. taxpayers' dime. As far as they're concerned, it's just the beginning. This should actually be a whole purge. And the individuals who thought to themselves, we're going to go ahead and hang out with Ed Blum. We're going to co-sign all of his anti-black stuff. These individuals are finding their own names on that list of undesirables. This matters because Ed Blum, after his attempts to lie and claim that white students were being discriminated against, he then switched to saying Asian students would be his stalking horse, even though there was not then nor is there now any evidence of discrimination against Asians or whites or anyone else not in academics and certainly not in Silicon Valley. And yet we see white males who are saying they want all of these Asians who are outperforming them gone. Well, I wonder what Ed Blum would be saying about that. Surely Ed Blum will be bringing lawsuits and saying, we can't be discriminating against people. You should just be the best and the brightest. Yet not a word about merit or test scores or application standards or anything. Notice that? Whatever happened to, we freely admit that Asians score higher than white people on standardized testing? They were using Asians as a stalking horse to justify their white supremacist agenda. And now they don't need them anymore. And why did so many Asians go along with it? Not all, but enough. Well, we have to ask what happened with Peter Liang when we had literal Hands Across America support for him. They're not being denied admissions when it comes to schools, colleges, or universities. That's a lie. In fact, we prove right here on this channel there's been a ton of stories about all kinds of admissions scandals where you had individuals buying their way into these schools. Black students don't do that. However, you have a lot of Asians who are overrepresented when it comes to tech sector jobs. So why are so many Asians willing to play along with Ed Blum's lies? Well, as a case study, if you look what happened in Africa, especially in places like Uganda and South Africa, there were those who wanted to solidify their place as honorary members of the oppressor class. In fact, in South Africa, Asians have been called honorary Aryans. White supremacy is a system of goodies, giveaways, but most importantly, guarantees. And there were a lot of people who wanted assurances, guarantees that they would finally be full-fledged members of the oppressor class, no honorary to it. To the people who played the part of extras in Ed Blum's racist judicial theater, they saw what they were doing as a political and to an extent even ethnic merger. That they would have a political merger with the white right around the shared value of hating black people, not because black people did anything to them, but simply because black people exist. This agenda of ethnic cleansing being called non-discriminatory is the height of Orwellian doublespeak. But then again, as Neely Fuller said, white supremacy believes in taking both sides of the conversation. You have the racist who have lied through their teeth, and they're claiming, well, we're doing it because we're not racist. Last year, when Harvard and other Ivy League schools were making their admissions, Ed Blum was fuming and whining. When is he not whining? He was whining that the numbers of black students hadn't gone down. See, that's what his brain, such as it is, made a beeline to. He wasn't concerned about the number of Asians who had gotten admitted. He was concerned about how many black students had been denied admission. He wanted to see that black people were being ethnically cleansed, because that's what this entire racist operation was about. He was furious. He saw all the admissions data, and like the racist gerbil he is, he zeroed in on black students because that's why the wealthy white supremacists who have funded him all these decades put him out there, to attack black people with frivolous lawsuits. Keep in mind, this racist punk's anti-black jihad began in the 90s, during the Clinton administration, and Democrats did absolutely nothing about it. When Obama was elected, Mitch McConnell and the Federalist Society declared that they had to capture the federal judiciary because it was now obvious their days of controlling who writes the laws were numbered. Now they had to try to buy themselves some more time by controlling who interprets the laws, which means they would legislate from the bench, all the while accusing their opponents of doing that. No matter how constitutional or legally valid something may be, they would simply declare that any law, any policy they didn't like was unconstitutional because they didn't like it. Obama and the Democrats controlled the Senate during his second term, but because Obama squandered the support he had, Democrats lost control of the Senate after the 2010 midterms, and Democrats were too busy worrying about not being antagonistic toward white conservatives. They didn't care that Mitch McConnell and the Federalist Society had begun a hyper-aggressive campaign to ramrod as many Federalist Society stooges into the federal courts as possible. And this agenda of front-loading the courts with right-wing zealots would pay off a couple of years later when Ed Blum and his pals filed the Shelby v. Holder lawsuit, which struck down the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act. Now, the right-wing members of the Supreme Court knew that the law was legal and constitutional. The Voting Rights Act was absolute rock solid. They couldn't claim it was unconstitutional to be passed. They also knew they didn't actually have the legal right to strike it down either. As Antonin Scalia himself admitted, the politicians wouldn't do it because the public would punish them at the polls. So the right-wingers on the court, they had to strike down the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act because they said they felt that it was obsolete. Now, never before in human history have you had a law struck down because it was called too effective. Nobody would ever get rid of drunk driving laws because the number of DUIs hit zero. Nobody would ever get rid of the murder laws because the number of homicides hit zero. The only people who want to get rid of laws prohibiting murder are the people who intend to commit murders. The only people who want to get rid of laws regarding drunk driving are the people who want to go ahead and drive drunk as a skunk. And the only people who want to get rid of anti-discrimination laws are the people who think they're still in a position to discriminate, and they don't want anything to infringe on that. Remember, white power is all about being able to pick and choose who the winners are going to be. And if you allow for too much progress to go on too long, well, you lose that ability, which means you're not in charge. Nowhere did Scalia or any of his pals mention where the court had the authority or the justification for its ruling. This was what the Federalist Society had been aiming to do since they were started in the 1980s, legislate from the bench. Ed Blum's nuisance suits had been laughed out of the courts ever since the 90s, up until Obama and his cronies sat on their hands and allowed the GOP to take over the federal courts. And then Obama refused to demand that the ego-driven fool Ruth Bader Ginsburg resign from the Supreme Court, even after she'd been diagnosed with cancer. Ginsburg didn't want to resign because she was determined to be on the bench when a woman, Hillary Clinton, presumably would become president in 2016. Maybe she imagined that she would be the one to administer the oath of office to President-elect Clinton. She was good buddies with Scalia, by the way. You see, this is what putting feminists in positions of authority gets you. The only reason that these right-wing schemes, from Rick Snyder and his emergency manager takeover in Michigan, to Chris Rufo and his CRT hysteria in Florida, to Ed Blum and his nuisance suits even gets through is because the Democrats have literally put forward absolutely no opposition to it. They won't even talk about opposing it. They don't want to make it an issue, and one has to wonder why. Prior to Obama, Ed Blum had made mostly no headway in the courts. His lawsuits were a joke, and would still be a joke today, but for McConnell and company making it a point to target the courts for takeover. Now all of a sudden we saw judges who were pretending to dignify these illegal courtroom maneuvers. They did that in direct response to Obama having been elected. Soon as he got in there, they're like, okay, we got this biracial buffoon in here. We do not want this to become habit-forming for the nation. We got to do something. We're losing everything. We're losing everything. Now, did Obama ever get angry at the Republicans for this? Of course not. That moron saved his vitriol for black protesters fighting police brutality, calling them thugs, and being the first public figure of any note to directly attack wokeness by name. That was Obama's response. That's who he attacked. And he's still attacking black people to the present. He has shown far more hostility toward black people than he ever has for the Republicans who have been on an anti-black jihad. Now, what does that tell you? And this also continued with Biden and Harris. At no point did any Democrat, especially not at the national level, be it Obama, Biden, Kamala Harris, Hakeem Jeffries, Pelosi, Schumer, any of them, ever say, all of this stuff the Republicans have been doing to attack voting rights, we're going to prop that stuff right back up. We got to get ourselves back in power so that we can undo the damage they've done and we can reestablish and reinforce all of these just laws that the Republicans have been attacking. Instead, the Democrats have done nothing about it. What does that tell you? What that lets you know is you're up against a controlled opposition who, as far as they're concerned, well, we need to go ahead and let this stuff go away because black people have been making too many demands. At no point did Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, or any of those other wrinkled-up racists or their suck-ups and professional butt-kissers like Kamala Harris, Jamie Harrison, or Jasmine Crockett, or Hakeem Jeffries, or anyone else point out that Democrats have to make retaking the federal courts their top priority, and that they must make sure Ed Blum and these other right-wing political operatives like Chris Rufo get shut down. There should have been a political declaration of war on the white right, but instead we were subjected to senile degenerates like nigga Jim Clyburn excoriating the Democratic base with his incoherent rantings. Democrats see themselves as nothing more than a DC-based social club. All they care about are their own personal perks and privileges. And we see this at the state level too. What do you think was happening when clowns like the California Legislative Black Caucus were literally smiling and laughing in the faces of black people, mocking them when they blocked that reparations bill? That's why this is happening. Democrats are not unable to fight the white right. They're refusing to do so because, as someone once said, they're too busy trying to keep their jobs to do their jobs. They're not in the business of representing their constituents. They're in the business of representing themselves. As they see it, their job is to make sure that they stay in office so they can get access to all of that sweet donor cash and all of those patronage and crony jobs that they can get from this or that white corporation. Just go ahead and ask Jim Clyburn and his daughter, Mignon Clyburn. First, he got her on the FCC, and then as soon as she left, she already had a number of quote-unquote consulting jobs lined up with the very communications companies that she was supposed to have been regulating. Gee, isn't it interesting how it always works out that way? They're supposed to be regulating these guys, legislating these guys, and then when they leave office, they work for those same guys. Seems there were a lot of people who were just taking it for granted that the game that's been going on for the last 50 years would simply be allowed to continue to go on. After all, black people haven't put their foot down. It's been a long time since we've done that. And they've had enough of these bootlicks and enough of these frauds and phonies out here to keep black folks in line. But now there's been a critical mass of us who have finally gotten on code. And now what we see is those people who thought to themselves that all of these little white supremacists they were making deals with were their buddies, here they are getting shown the door. Here they are being slapped in the face. And they're finding out that their old friends, they got worse in mind for them. This is just the beginning. Now, this is not to say that Trump and Musk are trying to do black people any favors. They're not. They got their guns trained at us. And we'll go into detail about that at a later date. But right now, it's very, very gratifying to watch as the people who made common cause with all of these anti-black racists, now they're finding themselves being slapped in the face, having these guys say, we'd like to wipe you off the face of the map. We'd like to get rid of all of you guys. Doesn't matter if you're here legally or not. We don't even like you. All of these guys are finding out that their buddies weren't their friends. See, all of these little wannabe Musk fanboys all these years, they've known exactly what Elon Musk is. They've known that he is nothing but a hardcore anti-black racist. They know that this guy is just a bigoted piece of garbage. They know that. That's why they love him. They can pretend as if, oh, well, we just like the guy because we think that he's so technologically minded. He's such an innovator. They can't even tell you what the hell he innovates. He didn't know a doggone thing about electric cars. He hired people who did. He didn't know anything about rockets either. That's why he had to ask to partner with NASA and not the other way around. NASA didn't go to him and say, oh, can we get your help on this stuff? He had to go to them. And as we see, he spends more time with his little bottle rockets exploding than actually making it into orbit. But those people who have been online making such a big deal about Elon Musk, about how brilliant they claim to believe that he was, now they're showing everybody exactly the real reason they were such Elon Musk fanboys. They knew about his white supremacist credentials, and that's what they liked about him. He just provided them with a slightly sanitized front that they could hide behind to camouflage their garden variety anti-black racism. But now that he's in the White House, they feel that they can finally put aside any pretense. They ain't got to act anymore. They don't have to pretend. Like, the reason we love him is because we think he's so brilliant. They can finally stop play acting like they thought that he was a genius. I mean, most of these people on the white right, they hate the Green New Deal. They don't even drive electric cars. How can they be fans of Tesla if they don't own one? And they have nothing but scorn for electric vehicles. And yet they were the main ones that you see drooling at the mouth to kiss the rump of this guy who made his billions off of green energy. And how can they do that? How can they be so two-faced? Because these white supremacists don't have any principles. They never have. All they have is moral relativism and situational ethics. Whatever they think is to their advantage at that particular moment, that's what they'll say they believe. And if it's exactly the opposite the very next day, then they'll claim to believe that. It's the reason why you got all of these people on the white right. They used to be Cold Warriors during the 1980s. That's why they love Ronald Reagan so much. He stood up to the Soviet Union. And today, they absolutely love Vladimir Putin. Why? Because they look at Russia as being a bastion of unabashed whiteness. And that's the reason why we see even in places across Europe that you got these folks who are claiming to love Vladimir Putin so much, love his stankin' drawers, even in Germany. Never mind the fact that the Germans and the Russians committed countless atrocities against each other during the Second World War. And yet it is that central tenet of whiteness that they're trying to use as the tie that binds them. And that's what they're trying to lean on. And that's what Vladimir Putin represents in the collective imagination of not just the white right in America, but in much of the world. But it's all going to come down. It's all a house of cards. And that's part of the reason why it's a good thing that the orange man got back in there. All of this stuff is finally coming to light. They are forcing the very all or nothing confrontation that they really need to be avoiding. But then again, why not? White supremacy is suicidal. I've been saying that for 15 years and I'll continue to say it till the day it falls. It will sacrifice its own children for its power and privileges. That's the reason they don't do anything about these mass shootings. And those who may not be classified as white, but have worked to help these white supremacists, they too have signed on to that same devil's bargain. So, as usual, when white supremacy is done with its tools, it breaks its tools. But understand, as we've seen in Latin America, the desire to be classified as white, or at the very least white adjacent, is so strong, so desperately desired, that even with these white supremacists kicking them in the teeth, they'll still be clinging to them until the bitter end. But make sure that if you see any black folks who are running around trying to say that, oh, we have got to stand in solidarity with, no. We're not standing in solidarity with anyone because we do not get involved in third-party disputes. And besides, the very people who you see who are getting slapped around right now, these are the ones who have been making sport of black people for decades. So that being the case, this was the team that they chose. Let them handle it. Illegal immigration has absolutely nothing to do with the civil rights movement. And all of this racism that they're going to be pointing at Asians, be it in Silicon Valley or the universities, has nothing to do with school desegregation back in the day. It's not at all analogous to Little Rock or any of those other schools that got desegregated in the 50s. And when it comes to anti-Semitism, well, if Elon Musk giving a Nazi salute gets downgraded and diminished and is downplayed as nothing more than a gesture by Jewish publications, by the way, if that's how they treat a man who is clearly giving a Nazi salute, and they see that he is fighting to rehire individuals who say that they want to wipe Israel off the face of the map, if their response to that is silence, well, there's an old joke about people who are mute. The punchline is basically, they didn't say anything about this joke, so I don't think you should either. And I pretty much say the same thing here. If people are going to be silent in the face of all of this aggression against them, that's fine, because what they think is this stuff is going to wash out in the end, and they'll be able to go back to business as usual, and business as usual is everybody dumps on black people. That's the normal that they're waiting to get back to. And all of the hysteria and all of the world is falling down around our ears that you see from the white media, what they're doing is they're rerunning the playbook from the first Trump administration. They're banging that drum about the Trump-pocalypse as hard as they can. And the reason why is it worked 5 years ago. It worked. They were able to successfully get people terrified. Well, you gotta vote against this guy. It's gonna be the end of the world. They scared the hell out of a lot of black folks. And that made them completely and thoroughly overlook the fact that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris weren't offering black people anything, telling themselves all kind of lies to rationalize the fact that they knew they had to lie to themselves to vote for this guy. So they're going to be banging that drum hard as they can. Let me tell you something. You don't let any of these people, be it on white cable or these white publications and websites, or even the people you have in your community who are telling you you need to be scared of the orange man. Well, compared to what? If I'm supposed to be opposing Donald Trump, then I want to know what the hell am I going to be getting? Do you see the Democrats saying anything about what they're going to be doing even now? Do you see them saying anything about we have got to finally start standing up for all of these laws, all of these policies, and most importantly, this constituency that we haven't stood up for and haven't done a doggone thing for the benefit of in decades? We got to stick up for these guys. We have got to do things for them. Do you see them saying that? Or do you even now see them doing nothing but recycling the same old talking points from 5 years ago? He's too dangerous. He's too dangerous. He's attacking the pillars of our democratic institutions. I ain't seen a damn one of those institutions who's done anything for black people. American democracy is a contradiction in terms. It's an oxymoron that only a moron would believe in. No, these guys are getting out here and they're doing the same old song and dance, running the same old play from 5 years ago. We're just going to put it on repeat. Trump is too dangerous. He's doing this, that, and the third. Okay, fine. Let's say that I believe you. I want to know, what are you going to do for me to benefit me? Because you have watched as my rights, all of the pillars of my power and all the pillars of my empowerment have been destroyed, have been knocked down. And you didn't do a damn thing about it. Oh, but all of a sudden you're finding that you're feeling some heat and now there's a crisis. Yeah, it wasn't a crisis when black people were the ones being attacked morning, noon, and night. In fact, Democrats, when they weren't just sitting back and letting these attacks happen, in many cases, they were actually complicit in and involved in these attacks. Just on a side note, Marco Illes said a number of racist things. Some of it's made it into the white media news cycle, but you know, there was one thing he said that nobody wanted to pay attention to. He said that he had advocated for the repeal of the Civil Rights Act. Everybody's heard about the Indian stuff that he said, and everybody's heard about the stuff that he said about Israel. But the one thing that he said that could tangentially be pointed at the black community about the repeal of the Civil Rights Act, didn't hear anything about that at all. So even now what they're doing is they're saying, well, let's keep in mind, we need to be outraged for the people who we actually want to take care of. But anything regarding black people, well, black people need to once again throw themselves on the pyre, and we need to immolate ourselves for everybody else. We need to sacrifice ourselves for everyone else. Well, I'd like to know, why is it then that the very people who were being told we should sacrifice ourselves for, why were they helping all of these racists and bigots get into power? Helping them to push their lying, fraudulent lawsuits? Helping them to push laws that specifically were meant to attack us, helping make sure that these guys got into the highest offices in the land. And sure, Elon Musk gave a lot of money to Donald Trump's campaign, but you want to know who else gave a lot of money to the orange man? Miriam Adelson. And who's she? She's the widow of the late Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate. Miriam Adelson is an Israeli. And when Donald Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, this is right in line with what it is that she and her pals in the Likud party want, what Benjamin Netanyahu and the rest of those guys are trying to get done. So as far as she was concerned, that was money well spent. And if Elon Musk is giving the occasional Nazi salute and his pals are saying that they wouldn't mind seeing Israel wiped off the face of the map, a lot of these guys are telling themselves that basically, well, it doesn't really matter. These are just some loudmouth blowhards. Sure. The same way that 100 years ago, there was another loudmouth, a failed artist from Austria, who decided that he was going to dip his toes into politics, and his very first political move was to attempt a push or coup against the German government. I don't think I have to spell out for you who that guy was and how it turned out, or the fact that there were a lot of people who would become his victims, many of whom actually thought they could cut a deal with the Nazis. The Ed Blums and Stephen Millers and Miriam Adelsons of their day. The individuals who thought to themselves that if they just heaped enough scorn on someone else, that maybe these little anti-Semites who had gotten into power would not be so angry at them. Maybe they would moderate. There were a lot of people who were completely silent as the Nazis became more and more belligerent, including a number of Jewish people in the United States who should have stood up and stood against them, but didn't. They were either trying to figure that they would just lay low and not say anything, or worse, there were some of them who thought that they could make friends with these Nazis. Hey, if I go ahead and help these guys out, then they'll leave me alone. Didn't work then, won't work now. This is what the Ed Blums and others are doing. As far as they're concerned, they think to themselves that they just dump enough hate on black people, that somehow is going to make them honorary members of the Aryan Club, and it won't. All that happened for them was the Judenrat had the distinction of being the last ones put on the cattle cars. When you see Elon Musk giving Nazi salutes, when you see him going to the mat to protect guys who have said they want to see Israel wiped off the face of the map and other things, he's made it clear what he stands for. And as far as he's concerned, white means more than a distinct lack of melanin. You gotta have more than that in his eyes. And this is the richest man on the planet, who now is sitting in the White House. So the wake-up calls are continuing, and a lot of people who had spent decades hitting the snooze button, well, now these guys are getting a wake-up call from hell. But truth be told, this was what a lot of them caused to happen. And that being the case, since they were the ones who brought it about, it falls to them to do anything about it. Or not. But either way, they've got no one to blame but themselves. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Will Miles, Amir Miller, James Porter, Alfredo Roberts, and Anthony Pollard. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.